I decided to go on a little road trip. I wanted to visit a distant relative. It wasn't far, about 200 miles. And who would have thought that on the road, which you know like the back of your hand, something terrible could happen. And not even scary, but incomprehensible. I put gas in the car in the morning and hit the road. Driving along, whistling. The weather's nice, birds are singing, there's a breeze. No cars on the road. So I was almost halfway there, but then I remembered how my grandfather told me there was a shorter road. It saves time, but here's the problem. The road is unpaved, it goes through the fields, and if you get there after the rain, you'll have problems. It hadn't rained for about 3 weeks. So I decided to try a new route. I went off the highway and drove through the fields, everything was fine, but suddenly I saw the road descend into the ravine, and there was fog. It was so thick that I couldn't see anything. I slowed down and thought. But I couldn't go back. So I slowly went down. I was surrounded by such thick palpable darkness. I could only see a meter ahead. So I was going and I was surprised. It looks like a small ravine, but I'm going through a whitish fog, the ravine does not end. Its high slope stretched above me. I was about to go back, but I was afraid to turn around. Nothing unusual, fog and mist. But I was too afraid all of a sudden. It seemed that if I slowed down a little bit, I would be swallowed by a whitish mist. At last, to my joy, I saw the sun breaking through the thick fog. And the road went up. At last the cursed ravine was over. I got out of it, I turned around, but the fog was still thick and the ravine was not more than 30 meters long. It was a miracle. I did not puzzle over this riddle. I went further. I went down the country road straight to the city. I thought that my cousin would be surprised to see me. But I had to be surprised. I drove into town and cannot understand anything. The city seems to be the same, but everything around is different. Instead of the usual low-rise buildings, there were giants reaching all the way to the sky. I cannot count the number of stories. People are strange, their clothes are motley, and they look strange. And the cars around, I have never seen such cars in my life. Not a familiar model. I think I just saw a car just like mine around the corner. I realized that I would go crazy if I drove further inland. It was the wrong city, after all. Only the streets remained in place and had the same name. I turned my beautiful car around and drove back. I did not look around much, I thought I would hurry home. I got to the ravine and the fog was almost gone. I realized that if it completely melts, I will never get home and I would never see my wife or son again. I don't know why I thought that. I sped up and, not sparing the car, rushed into the ravine. I skipped through the fog at full throttle, jumped out of the ravine and headed home. When I saw the familiar places, I just exhaled. Then I went to my relative only by the usual road. But the story did not end there. One day my wife and I went to visit them again. As I was driving into town, I suddenly remembered my strange trip. I look around, this is exactly how I saw the city 40 years ago when I drove through a strange ravine. And I realized that it was skyscrapers instead of new houses. And the models I did not understand were modern cars. I was in the future, it turns out. I grasped the steering wheel, my fingers turned white, I turned sharply into the alley, and when I turned, I saw my car, but it was 40 years newer than it looked now. And I saw myself behind the wheel as a young man. I wished good luck to my young self. The main thing now was that the guy had time to get back to the ravine, otherwise I was afraid to imagine what would happen.